So I think to recap, we said that theories are the basis for formulating theoretical and conceptual frameworks. And we need to agree that theoretical and conceptual frameworks are different. Although there are schools of thought that use them interchangeably and they think that they are similar. But today you are going to see that they are different and we shouldn't confuse the two terms, the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. So we need actually to make a clear distinction between the two research frameworks. And a theoretical framework is used when a study is underpinned by a single theory. A theoretical framework is used when a study is underpinned by a single theory. So if your study is informed by a single theory, it means that you have a theoretical framework. In other words, if your study is using all the aspects of a theory, and then your study is using a theoretical framework. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of irritation. I don't know where it is coming from. So we are saying you have a study and you have a theory. And for you to say you have a theoretical framework, your study must be informed by all the aspects of that theory. And then you have a theoretical framework. So coming up with a theoretical framework is not a challenge because you know that once you choose a theory and once you decide that all the aspects of the theory are going to address your study, then you have a theoretical framework. So what it means is your objectives should be aligned to the concepts in that theory. So your objectives will be, in other words, be a mirror of the components of that theory. So if we are not going to use all the components of a theory, then you don't have a theoretical framework. You have something different, as you are going to see. So from the word go, you have a theoretical framework when your study is informed by one theory and you are using all the components of that theory. You are not leaving out any of the components. You are using all the components of that theory, and therefore you have a theoretical framework. Every concept or aspect in the theory is represented in all the objectives or the research questions guiding your study. Then you have a theoretical framework. So it's a very simple thing. If you say I have a theoretical framework, it means that you have identified a theory, and after identifying a theory, you have decided to use all the components or the concepts or the aspects of that theory in your study, and therefore you have a theoretical framework. On the other side of a theoretical framework is a conceptual framework. You remember we said that concepts are ingredients of theories. So you can use certain concepts from a theory to form your conceptual framework. So a conceptual framework consists of concepts. These concepts can be from one theory, it can be from two theories, it can be from three theories, but these are concepts from theories. So once you decide that you are not going to use all the concepts in your theory, you no longer have a theoretical framework, you have a conceptual framework. You can actually say, I'm going to use two concepts from a theory and then throw away the other concepts. You still have a conceptual framework. And you can say that this theory only has two concepts that address my study. And the other objectives of my study are not addressed. Therefore, I need to find another theory to address the other objectives. So you look for another theory, and then you get the concept from that theory. And you still have a conceptual framework from two theories. So you can have a conceptual framework from one theory. You can have a conceptual framework from two theories. You can have a conceptual framework from three theories. I always advise that you cannot have a conceptual framework from more than four theories. It means that your objectives won't be smart enough. So a conceptual framework is a key part of a research project and is a key success factor in the approval of research proposals. And in most cases, a conceptual framework must be graphically depicted. And I like the way Van der Waals, and in your reading list, you'll find that I highlight Van der Waals as one source that you need to read after this seminar or webinar. Because Van der Waals says there are three core dimensions of a conceptual framework. And I like this conceptualization of a conceptual framework by Van der Waals, because I'm still going to come back to it. He says that one of the dimensions is your personal interest. The other dimension is the context. And the third dimension is the theoretical framework. In other words, a conceptual framework has a link to existing theory, in the sense that a conceptual framework is based on concepts from a theory. It's possible to have a conceptual framework that is not linked to a theory, but in most cases, a conceptual framework has got these three dimensions that Van der Waals is actually describing. So therefore, a conceptual framework can be developed by one getting components of theories, getting concepts from the literature, getting concepts from your own experiences, getting concepts from your own context. So this is why I was saying that existing theories cannot explain your context fully, because they were developed for a different context, or they were developed in a different context. So if you are going to use a theoretical framework in your study, it means you are depriving yourself of your personal experiences. You are depriving your research from your personal interest. You are depriving your research from your context of the study. So most of the studies that have been conducted up to now, they fall short of the context. They fall short of the experiences of the researcher. They fall short of the interests of the researcher. And therefore, they cannot fully explain the phenomenon that the researcher would be trying to understand. So therefore, I would urge you, as a second takeaway, to try and, as far as possible, use a conceptual framework rather than a theoretical framework. Because a theoretical framework rules out the inclusion of your personal interest. It rules out the inclusion of the context of the study. because it is actually saying, as a theoretical framework, we are using the concepts from that theory and nothing more than that. And that's what makes it a theoretical framework. So as researchers that are trying to develop knowledge, as researchers that are trying to change the world, would rather use conceptual frameworks rather than theoretical frameworks. We borrow from the existing theories. And in addition to those three existing theories, we add our own personal interest. We add our own personal context. We add our own personal experiences and our own context as the indigenous people. Let's look at this diagram. Everybody is set underneath a tree in one way or another. I know some of you were born in the urban areas where there are very few trees, but I know that you know the idea of a tree in one way or another. In this diagram, I have an acacia tree. This is a very common tree in southern and eastern Africa, in the savanna region. If you look at this tree, you can see that it has got different components. So I have moved from the tree and I've gone to the components of the tree. So if I am here, I would say I am looking at an acacia tree. This is a tree. And for me, therefore, this tree is an analogy of a theoretical framework. So if you are saying you are using a theory or a theoretical framework, you are using all the components of this tree, from the leaves to the bark, to the trunk, to the branches, to the roots. And if I go to the second screen, here I have components of my theory. My theory is the acacia tree. So if I take the log, just in the where's my left now? I'm trying to discover my left from where I'm sitting. On the left-hand side, there's a log there. Just below the three-forked trunk, there's a log. When you take this log, you cannot say that I am sitting on a tree. You'll say I'm sitting on the log of an acacia tree. And if you take this log and make fire, you cannot say I'm making fire from a tree. You'll say I'm making fire from the logs of a tree. So what I'm trying to say here is to show you the difference between a theoretical and a conceptual framework. So you cannot say that a log is a tree, in as much as you can say a tree is not a log. So when you have a theoretical framework, you are using the tree. Whatever you are doing it out of the tree. But when you have a conceptual framework, you have now parts of a tree to use. So you can see you can use the logs to make fire. You can use the logs as your seats if you want. And therefore that becomes your conceptual framework rather than a theoretical framework. How do you construct a conceptual framework? To start with, you look at your title that addresses your research problem. And in your title, you look for specific concepts, variables, constructs. Remember that some people call them concepts, some people call them variables, some people call them constructs, depending on your profession and your vocabulary. So you look for these in your title. After looking for these in your title, you remember we go to the literature. You remember one of the dimensions of Van der Waals of a conceptual framework is theory. So theory is equivalent to literature. We review the relevant literature to identify the concepts. We review the relevant literature to classify the concepts. And then we start constructing a basic conceptual framework using the information that we have gathered. You must remember when you are constructing your theoretical framework to go back to the diagram that I showed you on theory building. You remember that in that diagram, we say that you start by gathering and assessing information. This is where you are identifying the concepts from the literature and from the practice. So you are looking at the relevant literature, you are identifying the concepts. At the same time, you are looking at the practical environment. At the same time, you are looking at your context to identify concepts. So the concepts are from the literature, the concepts are from your context, the concepts are from your experience. And then put together, you try to construct a conceptual framework. The easiest way of constructing a conceptual framework is to draw two big boxes, or should I call them two squares or two rectangles, one to the left and the other to the right. The one on the left, that is when I'm saying left, I mean when you are looking at the paper where you are drawing on, or when you are looking at the computer where you are plotting the triangles, I mean the rectangles or the squares. So to the left, you put all the concepts. Everything is cooked in the left. And then to the right is the outcome. So that's how I normally construct my conceptual framework. Left, I throw all the concepts there. Then to the right, and then I now say, how do these concepts interact with my environment to get the outcome that I want? Then I have an outcome. Then I have a general explanation of this world. And as I said, I leave this explanation to the qualitative people to test it or to develop it further. And most of you, of course, you develop frameworks in your studies. And your frameworks are nothing less than what I would call a broader explanation that I would say it is equivalent to a model that can be transformed into your theory if that model is tested. So obviously, to indicate the relationship between the two boxes, we use lines and arrows. So the conceptual framework becomes a tool that we can use for our literature review, becomes a tool that we can use for our data collection, becomes a tool that we can use for our data analysis and recommendations and conclusions. Now, this is a diagram I constructed in 2020. I'm not so sure whether I'm going to construct a better one, but for me, this is how you construct your conceptual framework. And if you trace our steps back, you realize that I've been encouraging you to operate in circle number 3. That is the circle labeled 3 there. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles. And the circle number 3 is where I want us to operate in, whereby we incorporate aspects of a theory or aspects of theories. Then we incorporate concepts from the literature. Then we incorporate concepts from our personal experiences. We incorporate concepts from our knowledge, and we incorporate concepts from our context. And that is the only way we can have a conceptual framework that can fully explain the phenomenon that we will be investigating. I think I told you that using a theoretical framework deprives you of the concepts from the literature. It deprives you of personal experiences. It deprives you of the knowledge of the context. So this is why I am saying, going forward, I am encouraging you to use a conceptual framework rather than a theoretical framework. Because a theoretical framework tends to limit you. It doesn't open up avenues for you to experiment with ideas and come up with new knowledge that can change this world. I think those of you who are doing PhDs, that can be a gap in knowledge. So either to most of the studies that have been conducted, they've been using theoretical frameworks. And the theoretical frameworks don't really give us the opportunity to create new knowledge. We are just trying to either to prove that theory or to disprove the theory, falsify the theory, or prove the theory, or confirm the theory. That's what we're doing when we are using a theoretical framework. We are not able to really develop new knowledge in a way. So I'm not going to explain all the cycles because I know you can read when you get I'll give the presentation to Mosima, and Mosima is going to share it with all, share the presentation with all the people who are attended this seminar or webinar. So I'm not going to explain this. And if you check some of my writings, you'll get this diagram. Now, I looked at one example. I wrote this article, Improving the Quality of Reporting Findings Using Computer Data Analysis Applications in Education Research in Context. Remember, I say that you start with a title, and I've given you my title. And then from my title, I said, what is the phenomenon that I am investigating? I am investigating the use of computers. And I look in the literature, and maybe I'm not getting any theory on the use of computers. Then it dawns to me that computers are an innovation. So therefore, if computers are an innovation, I have to think outside the box and try and now therefore identify from the literature what concepts depict computers. And now I found out that innovation is what will help me to get concepts that will help me to explain the phenomenon that I am researching. So I want to find out to what extent, therefore, are education researchers, to what extent have they embraced this innovation, the innovation called computers. So it's a specific innovation called computers. And as I check for innovations, I discover two major theories that talk of innovations. One of the theories is the diffusion of innovation theory, and the other is the technology adoption model. Of course, there are many variations of this model, but I decided these are the two major theories that speak to innovation. And then I look at my methodology. I realize that with my methodology, I cannot use the technology adoption model. I can only use the diffusion of innovation theory. So therefore, what I'm trying to say here is, when you choose a theory, you must actually tell us why this theory and not the other. So in this case, I didn't choose the technology adoption model because of the nature of my methodology. Because the technology adoption model requires me to talk to people. But my methodology does not involve any talking to people. My methodology just involves reading theses that have been produced by education researchers. So I opted for the innovation itself, that is the computer technology, to say to what extent have they adopted the innovation itself. So I'm focusing on the innovation itself. So therefore, I'm not going to use other concepts from the technology adoption model. And then, of course, I use a bit of information from the context. And the context is limited because the context is of the thesis and my knowledge. That's what I use to inform the conceptual framework. So I just gave this example as a rudimental or as a rough example of how you could go about constructing a conceptual framework for your study from your title. This is not such a good example, but it does illustrate the point that the starting point of constructing a conceptual framework are the constructs in your title. And the construct I used in my title was computers. And then I reduced computers in an innovation rather than looking at computers per se. I look them as an innovation and how that innovation has been adopted by education researchers. You can actually read the full text of the article to see the example further. It is available online for free of charge. You don't have to buy it if you want to interrogate the example further. So before I step down from theoretical frameworks and conceptual frameworks, I want to talk about two things: the use of theory, and to try to have a distinction between decolonial theory and indigenous theories. So those are the two areas I'm going to cover now. So I have actually, in my view, clearly shown you the distinction between a theoretical and a conceptual framework. And I have actually encouraged you to use a conceptual framework rather than a theoretical framework for reasons that I gave you. That a conceptual framework gives you room to be creative. It gives you room to fully explain the phenomenon that you are trying to investigate. Whereas the theoretical framework actually constrains you because you have to deal with the concepts in the theory rather than all the concepts also found in your context and all the concepts that are also informed by your experiences and knowledge. So one of the things is that when we are using a conceptual and a theoretical framework, we shouldn't use it because the reviewers or the supervisors say you need it. But unfortunately, of course, I need to take back this statement because we agreed from the beginning that one of the attributes of a graduate in South Africa is that they must use theory. So therefore, your project must have a theoretical or a conceptual framework. And I have said to you, I prefer that you use a conceptual framework. But for you to start using a conceptual framework, you need to read widely to convince even your supervisor why you are using a conceptual framework and not a theoretical framework as the established know. So when you use a theory, you must not use it in the wrong way. You mustn't apply it in the wrong way. What is the wrong way of applying a theory? The wrong way of applying a theory is mentioning a theory and you don't align the theory to your objectives, to your data collection, to your data analysis, and to your conclusions. So once you mention a theory that this is my theoretical framework, we must see how the theoretical framework informs your review of the literature. We must see how your theoretical framework informs your data collection. We must see how your theoretical framework informs your data analysis. And we must see how your theoretical framework informs your conclusion. And that is what we call the proper use of theory. The proper use of theory is making sure that the theory is used in all the aspects of the study. And as you can see from this slide, I refer to theory dropping. Theory dropping is a phenomenon or is a situation whereby you just mention a theory and at the beginning, because your supervisor wants a subheading called the theoretical framework, you put the subheading theoretical framework, you mention the theory, the supervisor is happy, and they never refer to that theory until you submit your thesis. That is theory dropping. And that is very common in many theses that I have looked at. One of the areas of my research is actually scholarly communication. So I look at theses in many fields, and I've realized that one of the pitfalls is that people just say theoretical framework, they mention the theory, and that theory is not used in the objectives. That theory is not used in the review of the literature. That theory is not used in the collection of data analysis, or even the conclusions. And that is theory dropping. Theory dropping is just like name dropping. Name dropping, remember that at times you just introduce a name of a big person in a conversation to show that you know big people, or to show that you are very important, but at the same time, that name won't be relevant to that conversation. So theory dropping as well is just mentioning a theory that is not of any use to your research. That is theory dropping. And the other pitfall is theory diversification. You remember when we were looking at constructing a conceptual framework, if we look at number one, putting together concepts from various theories, this is where you can actually have a problem of diversification. The question is how many theories, how many theories, from how many theories should you get concepts for your study? From how many theories should you get concepts from your conceptual framework? I don't have an answer for that, but I always advise my students that if you find yourself using more than 4 theories in getting the concepts that you want, it means that your objectives or research questions are not focused. If they are focused, you should actually at most use about 3 theories. Get concepts from about 3 theories to inform your objectives. I'm not saying that is what you should do, because I don't have any authority to back me. I'm just using my experience to say that if you find yourself having more than 4 theories to draw your concepts from, it means that your objectives are not focused enough. So you try to make your objectives focused, combine certain objectives and make them as smart and as researchable as possible. And that way, you won't have the problem of theory diversification. So I don't have any number, but by the rule of the thumb, I recommend that you shouldn't use more than 4 theories to draw your conceptual framework. As I said, before I stepped down, I needed to talk to this contentious subject in the academy. People now, especially, you remember, fees must fall, roads must fall. It is your generation that is challenging the knowledge production in the academy. It is your generation, actually, which is even challenging the theories that we are using in scholarship. It is your generation that is challenging the methodologies that we are using in scholarship. So this is why in my presentation, I try to answer that call from your generation to say theory development or theory building is not a monopoly of any scholar. Any scholar, any researcher can develop a theory. And I said Strauss and his colleague liberated us when they actually showed us through the grounded theory approach that you can develop theory from data. So therefore, anyone can develop theory from data. And I think I've done my part to answer your call to decolonize the academy, that the Western knowledge systems must accommodate our knowledge systems and the roads must fall. So there is a misconception in the discourse about indigenous theory and the decolonial theory. Some people think that decolonial theory and the indigenous theory, they are one and the same thing. Just like you remember, we said that there are people who speak conceptual frameworks and the theoretical frameworks are one and the same things that can be used interchangeably. But I'm saying indigenous theory and the decolonial theory, they are not the same and they cannot be used interchangeably. And as you agree with me, Africanization, decoloniality, indigenization, they all confront the established Western knowledge systems. They are confrontational. So in that way, they are birds of the same feather. They share the same lineage because they confront the hegemonic Western knowledge system. But what you should understand is that decoloniality emerged out of the critique of colonization, racialization, and the hegemonic tendencies. That's how decoloniality came to be. Whereas, on the other hand, indigenous epistemologies did not emerge as a critique of Western hegemonic systems. Indigenous knowledge systems have been there as long as our indigenous people have existed. That's why we say indigenous knowledge have existed from time immemorial. Western knowledge, decolonial thought, all these are recent phenomenon because they are newer than indigenous knowledge systems. So therefore, when we talk of indigenous knowledge systems, when we talk of indigenous theories, we shouldn't confuse them with the decolonial theories because they are not the same. Decolonial thought, as we all agree, is very progressive. It gives indigenous scholars tools of deconstructing the current knowledge system, the current knowledge production system, the current knowledge dissemination system. But it does not replace indigenous knowledge systems, and they should not be used interchangeably, and they should not be confused with each other. And I know that you want me to conclude now. I've done my 1 hour, and what I leave you with are these words of wisdom. And if you want to engage on what I've been sharing with you, you can read what I've written on about these issues. You can also contact me on the email address that I give there in the slides. But what we all agree on is that theories are fundamental to science and creating new knowledge. And we have agreed that as we theorize, we should try to remember that theories are social constructions. They are not universal formulations, and therefore they cannot explain every situation. And as we theorize, we should try to lean towards conceptual frameworks as or in contrast to theoretical frameworks. And we've agreed that theories hold various aspects of empirical research together. And it is extremely difficult to effectively understand and explain social reality and research variables without theories. And finally, by signature, uh, saying a bird does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it is a song. I wasn't trying to give you an answer to theorization in a conceptual framework. I was giving you my song. And I think it's up to you to join me in the song and use conceptual and theoretical frameworks appropriately, and also use decolonial and indigenous theories appropriately. And then you would have joined my song. And I thank you for taking your time to listen to me. And these are a list of references that I consulted in coming up with this presentation. And I would want you to focus on the ones that I've highlighted in yellow. They are very interesting uh, uh, pieces of work that can inform your understanding of these contentious issues. And these are not the only sources that you have to consult. This is just to give you a shot in the arm, and there are a lot of them. And I was actually even reading of a 2023 source on theoretical and conceptual framework that was written in Uganda, and I think it is worth also reading. So I thank you very much.
My question to you is that I've heard you saying a conceptual framework is when you can't use one theory, but you can use more than one, because the concepts that you need are from different theories. Or you can even use one theory, but you might find that the theory doesn't have all the concept that you're looking for. But in this regard, I want to ask you a question. If I have two theories, or I've identified one theory and maybe two models, how do I now come up with a conceptual framework? Do I call the other concepts? Let's say, for instance, I need something on infrastructure, and something talking to the state of readiness, or records management, like we always use some of the models or the theories. And I want to use more than two theories and one model. So from the model, do I take a concept or a construct? There's this terminologies that I use. Someone says there's a construct, constructs or concepts. I just want to understand, if you're using theories plus models, then how do you come up with the conceptual framework? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laibon, for your question. But for you to get an answer, you need your credit card, because this is a very difficult question, which needs me to think very carefully. What you should remember, Laibon, the question of concepts, constructs, variables, it depends whether people in, for example, in psychology, they call them constructs. And some people in social sciences, they call them concepts. Some people in natural sciences, they call them variables, but they are almost referring to the same things. So you don't have to worry about terminology. You just have to stick to one. Once you choose to use word concepts, use the word concepts throughout. Once you decide to use word constructs, use the word constructs throughout. Once you use the word variables, but the problem with the variables is that variables has got that quantitative connotation. So if your study is not necessarily quantitative, some of us will say you are using the wrong language. For example, if you are using a qualitative approach, the moment you use word variable in qualitative, for me, that is not qualitative language. But if you use the word concepts, that is qualitative language. And a construct is both qualitative and quantity, but I always prefer concepts as a qualitative person. So therefore, it is a matter of you deciding on the two. But if you are a qualitative person or if you are a neutral person, just use the word concepts rather than cornering yourself with the word variables, because variables is very quant. That's point number one. But that is not your main question. Your main question is you are drawing upon theories and models to formulate your conceptual framework. And you are saying, how do I go about it? Right. Remember when we started Libon, maybe you were not here when we started, but maybe you were there, but I didn't explain properly. I said that the ingredients of a theory are concepts. So that part is clear. I think we agree that. So you can get concepts from a theory, or you can get concepts from a number of theories to build towards your conceptual framework. But now you bring in another dimension, model. A model is an unrefined theory. I think you understand that I say that a model can be a representation of a theory, but it can be an unrefined theory. A model can just be like a framework, like a policy. A policy is not a theory, but is a model. It can be classified as a model. Like you talk of the South African Constitution. That is not a theory, but that can form your conceptual framework because you can take concepts from the Constitution to inform your study. So you are using your Constitution as the model that informs your study. So it's the same thing. You can use another model. You can use concepts from a model to add on to a conceptual framework, but it is still a conceptual framework. Once you draw together concepts from, you remember I said you can draw concepts from theories. You can draw concepts from your personal experiences. You can draw concepts from the literature. You can draw concepts from models. All these brought together, they form your conceptual framework. So the fact that you are drawing from models, the fact that you are drawing from your personal experience, the fact that you are drawing from your context does not mean that now you have something different that you are formulating. You are still working within a conceptual framework, and that's what you are trying to draw together. Whether you're saying you are bringing in variables, but it's a conceptual framework. And as I said again, with the use of language, it depends whether you are quanti or quali. And as I advised, a neutral person would rather use concepts rather than variables. I don't know if I don't answer you. You can indicate where I left a gap. And I think also that relates to the question that you was asked on there's a colleague who was struggling with the network and was asking the difference between a conceptual framework and a model. So in other words, the conceptual framework, your model can be your conceptual framework. As I explained that your Constitution of South Africa can be your conceptual framework. You are using concepts from the Constitution to explain certain issues that you are investigating. So your constitution, because it's not a theory, it's just a policy document, it becomes your conceptual framework, and you draw upon the Constitution of South Africa to explain your issue. And in various areas where you are working on, you may find that there are laws. For example, people in the College of Law, they work a lot with laws and cases and so forth. All those can form their conceptual framework because they are using concepts from those frameworks and to inform them. And indeed, like when you have finished your study, you are going to have maybe a framework, and you are going to call it a framework, whether for records management. But that framework can also be called a model. And we can actually use that model to test its robustness and eventually turn it into a theory. Or we can use aspects from that model to actually inform other studies. So it's possible actually to use even what we call a framework as a model or as a conceptual framework. Because I can also just take your conceptual framework as it is and use it in my study. But again, the pitfalls of that is that my context may be different from yours. This is why I said when we use our conceptual framework, we must always remember our context, our experiences, our knowledge, our interests. They must always be embedded in our conceptual framework. That's what I advocate.
Thank you so much. Maybe before I read the other question, let me just, trying to do the follow-up on what you're talking now. At some point, I learned or I assumed whatever the information was shared was that as a doctoral student, you might not look forward to be creating or developing a model, but maybe what you can do is to look at the framework, and then you can only, with the development of one model or models thereafter, when you do a postdoctoral degree or maybe after sometimes when you have just became a doctor after your studies. I'm not sure what you are saying now. I hear where you're saying now after your conceptual framework will give you the framework. It will give you either a model or a guide. I don't know if you follow what I'm trying to ask.
I can
here.
follow. I know that program director.
Yes. Can you assist me in that area?
What you are saying actually is the old school of thought. And that is the school of thought that is actually killing us, because you are told that you cannot develop theory. Today, if you go to a supervisor, depending on his school of thought, he or she will tell you that you can't develop a theory. But if, as I say, you read and you convince them that actually one of the things that we should be doing at PhD level is to develop a theory, that can be tested by other researchers. So I know that story you are trying to tell us, and for me it doesn't hold water, because you are capable of developing a model or even a framework or a theory at this stage. I told you that Corbyn and Strauss, they liberated us. When they came up with the grounded theory, they argued that we can develop theory from data. So as long as you have data, you can develop theory. That's what those two Chicago scholars say, and I agree with them. So there's no level where you can say that at PhD level, maybe I should do this, I must be modest. There's nothing like that. For some of the theories that are being used, they were developed by PhD people. Some of the softwares, for example, that we are using in qualitative research, they were developed by PhD people. And that does not stop one from developing, because being a PhD does not mean that your knowledge is limited. It only means that you are just being initiated into this world of research. So I want us to move away from that myth that you cannot develop a theory, or you cannot develop a framework that can be used by others if you are a PhD student, even when you are a master's student. It depends on the level of theorization that you are involved in. So indeed, what you should be doing at PhD level, if you are going to be creating new knowledge, is actually to be creating new theories for the subject area, rather than depending on the theories of the dead French and the theories of dead Germans, the dead British theories. Let's actually come up with our own theories that our future children and grandchildren are going to test and find out whether they can be robust to explain this world. That's my view.
Thank you so much. And then maybe just to add on that, one of the Mrs. Ntuli has just indicated, I'll just read what he has written down. Thanks so much, Prof. I am now covered on models. Your feedback will assist me a lot, Prof. The supervisor asked me to develop the model already, Ms. Musima. I am the student. So, Prof, you can see that now, yes, this platform is really opening eyes for most of us. Thank you so much. Right.
Yes. Thank you very much. There's one last question, maybe, or I'll take one last question. And then there's one which says, how does one go about using three theories as lenses for a conceptual framework?
Yes, that's what
Paul, the answer is very simple. If there are three theories, and I think Leibon did allude to that in a question. If you have three theories, what you are saying is that you have what you are saying, you are saying that you have a research project. And in this research project, you have four objectives. This is a hypothetical, just for me to simplify my thoughts to you. You have a research project, Mpo, and you have got four objectives, right? And then you look into the literature, and then you discover a theory. And you discover that that theory only addresses one objective. So you take that concepts or constructs from that theory. And then you are left with the three objectives. They are not addressed. You look for another theory. Theory number two gives you two objectives. So you already have three objectives. So you go to theory number three, you look for another construct from theory number three for you to address the four objectives. So that's how you can use three theories as a lens for a conceptual theory. So your conceptual framework is based on three theories. Your conceptual framework is based on concepts from three theories. I hope I answer you, Mpo.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I wanted to check because there's a difference between a research proposal and a full thesis or a dissertation. So in this instance, because you don't just drop, you don't just, the word you used to say, you don't just say, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you leave it there. Then what is it that you must cover as a proposal before you go to the full thesis in terms of the conceptual framework?
That depends on your discipline and your supervisor. I cannot prescribe, because with my students, in a proposal, I need a full explanation of the conceptual framework. In my case, that's my preference. I cannot pass a proposal without a full conceptual framework or without a full theoretical framework.
Thank you.
So that is a preference of your supervisor and your discipline. But I would imagine that in most disciplines, especially in the social sciences, they would want you to have a full explanation of that. Because it is the link, because this is why at times we find that there's a debate whether the conceptual framework should come after the research objectives or before. And my contention is that the conceptual framework must come before the objectives, because it is the conceptual framework or theoretical framework that informs the objectives. So after I read your conceptual framework, when I get to your objectives or research questions, I should see the link. Then when I go to your literature review, I must see the link. That's how I look at it. So it depends on preferences. So where I'm making definitive statements is whereby I am saying, as researchers, and as serious researchers, we must actually lean towards a conceptual framework rather than a theoretical framework, because we are trying to produce knowledge that is trying to change the current situation. Because the theoretical framework will tend to constrain you. You are only explaining things to a certain limit, but not to a fullest extent. This is why I'm actually bold in that, because that's what I want our scholars to be doing, and to be developing models. That's what I want our scholars to be doing. And also to be incorporating their own contexts, and also to be going beyond the belief that theories that are existing can explain everything. There I'm very bold that I can stand for that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. I don't know whether I'll be wrong to say we're having the last person who just put up their hand disappeared.
It should be the last program director.
Awelani, do you still want to ask something or what? Because I see your hand is down now.
Maybe the process I answered Awelani's concerns, or
I would like to invite Ma'am Lindela Mahonga for the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, and good evening to our honored guests this evening. Thank you so much to everyone who has made time to come and join us at this gathering. For me to say I've been challenged would be an understatement, because every time I am fortunate to be in the audience of or company of the esteemed Professor Ngulube, I always walk away with a lot of food for thought, and today was no different. Actually, today is actually even more challenging in the sense that here I am sitting and I'm walking away with so much terminology to theory drop or name drop. The biggest takeaway for me is the VUCA world, because come tomorrow, I'll be posting to my colleagues about this VUCA world and asking them what are they planning to do to provide solutions around the issues that Prof. Ngulube has highlighted in our context as Africans here and in the process, challenging us to be brave enough to create our own theories. And like he said, touching on the indigenous theme of song, because Africa were known for song. I love that quotation where he said, he's inviting us to sing because we have a song, and I'm sure all of us have some song here or there or wherever, but we definitely do have a song, and I'm hoping that we will be challenged to think beyond the ordinary. And as he said, create our own knowledge, create theory, improve scholarship, and I'm definitely sure those of us who are researchers, current researchers, doctoral students, master's, honors, and those who are still planning to start, I think we have been challenged enough. The other takeaway that he drilled into us was the one about theory building not being a monopoly. And it's encouraging because we definitely do have a lot to talk about. We do have a lot that we can investigate, and I'm definitely sure that amongst us in this audience, someone will bring up a theory that we can name a so-and-so theory, like we've been doing with all these scholars that we are referencing in our studies. The other takeaway as well that I loved and that I will definitely keep in mind. Thank you, Prof. Ngulube, for that acacia tree I don't know, do I call it an analogy or metaphor or whatever, but I'm telling you that tree analogy that you've given will be one of my starting points, because every time I have to think about the conceptual framework and the theoretical framework and all the terms and words, big words that you discussed today, I'll be having an image of myself under that tree. I'll be having an image of myself using the branches, the leaves, the roots, and applying those to our areas of scholarship. Last but not least as well, another takeaway that I feel we should make a buzzword, the concepts that you highlighted towards the end of your presentation. You talked of indigenous epistemologies. You mentioned indigenous knowledge systems, Africanization. Honestly, the research world is wide open for us to come up with new areas of scholarship, and indeed to even encourage our children to start writing about Africa and providing the solutions that we need. Like you said, VUCA world. The VUCA world is right here with us. Every day you open the Twitter, which is now called X, or you watch the news, you listen to the radio. All these issues of the VUCA world are facing us. So thank you so much, Prof. Ngulube. And as we say in my language, ukwanda kwaliwa umthakathi, and please ungadinwa nangomuso when we, because I'm definitely sure we will do that. Please indulge us, because I am sure the audience here would love to have you back, because you are able to break down all these difficult or complex concepts on any topic that we put on the table. And I would really appeal to you to kind of adopt us, because we are still learning to walk, and would love to walk with someone with your expertise. May I also take this opportunity to thank the organizer of this gathering. Without the effort that you put, I know you had to run at the last minute because we had promised that we would host this topic. Thank you for all the effort that you took. Last but not least, like I've said, without this audience present at this moment, we wouldn't have made it a success. And please, when we do send out invitations, please join us. And do not be shy to also suggest to us other areas of research that you would like to have us cover for you, because like I always tell our students, you can never have enough when it comes to research knowledge sharing. You will listen to Prof. Ngulube today, listen to somebody else tomorrow. Every time you take something away. Hence, I loved all these gems of takeaways that he gave to us. Once more, Prof. Ngulube, ungadinwa nangomuso, ukwanda kwaliwa ngumthakathi, sibamba ngazo zombili, and thank you, siyabonga kuninonke for joining us tonight.
Colleagues, good evening and enjoy your night.